The Chinook helicopter descended through the thin mountain air, its rotors beating against the hostile Afghan sky like a war drum announcing her arrival. Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves sat in silence among the other passengers, mostly fresh replacements who couldn't hide their nervousness. Their hands gripped their rifles too tightly, their eyes too wide as they stared out at the unforgiving landscape below. Maya, by contrast, appeared almost serene, her gaze fixed on the distant peaks where snow met rock and shadows hid 1,000 dangers. She knew this terrain, she'd bled on it before. The helicopter touched down in a violent storm of dust and debris at Forward Operating Base Spearpoint, a collection of HESCO barriers, camouflage netting, and desperation carved into a valley surrounded by Taliban-controlled mountains. The base looked exactly like the intelligence photos she'd studied obsessively for months. Every guard tower, every fighting position, every vulnerability. But she wasn't here to assess defenses. She was here for something far more personal. Maya shouldered her rifle case and duffel bag, stepping onto Afghan soil with practiced ease while the other replacements stumbled and coughed in the rotor wash. A bored-looking specialist pointed toward a cluster of tents. "Command post is that way. Commander wants all new arrivals to report immediately." She made her way through the base, taking in everything with tactical precision. The sandbag walls were properly stacked but showed wear. The soldiers moved with the exhausted shuffle of men who'd been in combat too long without relief. Morale was low, she could see it in their eyes, hear it in the half-hearted greetings they offered. This was a base under pressure, slowly being ground down by an enemy that owned the night and the high ground. Perfect conditions for what she needed to do. The command post was a reinforced tent filled with maps, radio equipment, and the smell of stale coffee and stress sweat. Lieutenant Colonel James Hartwick stood over a tactical map, his jaw set in permanent frustration. He was exactly as described in his file, early 40s, combat veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, decorated but passed over for promotion twice due to his inflexible command style. Military speak for being an arrogant control freak who didn't play politics well. Maya snapped to attention. "Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves, reporting as ordered, sir." Hartwick glanced up with the expression of a man who'd been sent another problem instead of a solution. His eyes swept over her dismissively. 5'6", athletic build, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, features that revealed nothing. To him, she was just another body to fill a roster slot, and worse, a female body in a combat zone where he clearly believed women didn't belong. "Another specialist they're dumping on me," he muttered, not even trying to hide his contempt. His finger jabbed at the roster sheet. "Says here your signals intelligence with advanced marksmanship training. Let me guess. You qualified expert on some cushy stateside range, and now they think you're ready for the real thing." Maya kept her face neutral, though she'd heard variations of this speech 100 times. "I'm qualified in multiple weapon systems, sir. I'm here to augment your sniper operations as requested by—" "I didn't request anything," Hartwick interrupted, his voice rising. "JSOC keeps sending me specialists, technicians, and support personnel when what I actually need are infantrymen who can patrol these mountains and close with the enemy. We're 20% undermanned. Taliban attacks have increased 40% in the last month, and they send me a woman to play sniper." He threw the roster sheet onto his desk with disgust. "You know what the problem with the modern military is, Sergeant. Too many desk warriors in Washington making tactical decisions. They think war is about checking diversity boxes and good optics instead of putting the most lethal operators in the field." Maya's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. "With respect, sir, I'm here to do a job. Where you assign me is your decision, but I'm qualified for sniper operations." "Qualified?" Hartwick scoffed. "Everyone's qualified until the bullets start flying." He studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching for any sign of weakness, any crack in her composure. Finding none seemed to irritate him further. A captain entered the tent, lean, weathered, with the quiet confidence of a career infantry officer. "Sir, the new arrivals are processed. Where do you want them assigned?" Hartwick waved dismissively at Maya. "Captain Mills, this is Staff Sergeant Reeves. She's apparently here to revolutionize our sniper program. Find her something useful to do, inventory checks, equipment maintenance, maybe she can help the cooks. Just keep her away from actual combat operations until she's proven she won't get someone killed." The humiliation was intentional, designed to break her spirit or make her quit. Maya had experienced it before in different forms throughout her career. What Hartwick didn't know, what he couldn't know because her real service record was buried under enough classified stamps to fill a warehouse, was that his best sniper probably had a quarter of her confirmed kills. That his entire tactical team combined hadn't conducted operations in half the countries where she'd worked. That the diversity hire standing before him had once put a bullet through a hostage-taker's eye socket at 1,100 meters in a sandstorm, saving a senator's daughter while officially on a training exercise that never happened. But she said none of this. Instead, she simply saluted, "Yes, sir." As she left the command post, she heard Hartwick mutter to Captain Mills, "Give her 48 hours. She'll either wash out or get herself killed doing something stupid. Either way, problem solved." Maya walked toward the barracks assigned to support personnel, her face betraying nothing. Around her, soldiers went about their duties, cleaning weapons, filling sandbags, preparing for another night of sporadic mortar attacks and uncertainty. A few glanced at her with curiosity, others with the same dismissive attitude their commander had shown. Let them look, let them doubt. She'd been underestimated before. It was practically her superpower at this point. What none of them knew, what Hartwick with his medals and his arrogance couldn't possibly know, was that Maya Reeves wasn't here by accident. She wasn't some random assignment from a Pentagon personnel officer. She'd orchestrated this deployment through carefully planted requests, leveraged old contacts, and called in favors that would take years to repay. Because somewhere in these mountains, hiding among the Taliban forces that Hartwick couldn't seem to pin down, was the man she'd been hunting for 3 years. The man who'd killed her entire team and left her bleeding in the cobbled dust. The man whose face she saw every night when she closed her eyes. Commander Zarif. And this time, when Maya Reeves had him in her crosshairs, nothing, not Hartwick's contempt, not military protocol, not even her own safety, would stop her from pulling the trigger. She set her gear on an empty bunk and began unpacking with methodical precision, her mind already calculating angles, distances, and the 100 variables that separated a successful mission from a body bag. The other soldiers in the tent didn't know it yet, but a storm had just arrived at Fob Spearpoint. And her name was Phantom. For 3 agonizing days, Maya scrubbed pots in the base kitchen while the war raged around her. Steam from industrial sinks obscured her view, but she could hear everything: the distant crack of gunfire, the whomp of outgoing mortars, the frustrated voices of soldiers returning from failed patrols. Each sound was a reminder that she was wasting time, that Zarif could slip away while she played the role of the disrespected soldier accepting her punishment. But Maya had learned patience in the hardest school imaginable. She'd spent 72 hours lying motionless in a Syrian sewer waiting for a target. She'd hidden in the crawlspace of a Somali warlord's compound for 5 days, eating nothing but protein bars and her own rage. 3 days of kitchen duty was nothing. And while her hands washed dishes, her mind cataloged everything: guard rotations, communication patterns, the rhythm of the base's defenses. She noticed things others missed. The eastern perimeter had a blind spot between towers 3 and 4. The sniper teams rotated every 6 hours but took 15 minutes to actually change positions, leaving gaps. Commander Hartwick held briefings at 600 and 1800 sharp, his predictability a tactical weakness. The armory had inadequate security after 2200 hours. All useful information, all filed away. On the second night, Taliban mortars walked across the base in a pattern that suggested someone was adjusting fire based on real-time observation. Maya tracked the impact points and calculated the firing position, a ridgeline approximately 3,000 meters northeast. She mentioned it to the sergeant supervising kitchen duty. "Yeah, well, you're not paid to think, sweetheart. You're paid to clean." She returned to the dishes, biting back words that would only make things worse. On the third day, Captain Mills found her elbow-deep in soapy water. "Reeves, you're being reassigned. We need bodies for perimeter security. 12-hour shifts on Tower 7 starting tonight." It was a slight upgrade from kitchen duty, but barely. Tower 7 was the quietest sector, the one where nothing ever happened. Still, it got her closer to operational activities. She'd take it. That night, Maya climbed the wooden ladder to her assigned post. The tower was a simple platform with sandbag walls, a mounted M240 machine gun, and a spectacular view of absolutely nothing interesting. Just empty desert stretching toward distant mountains barely visible in the darkness. Her tower partner was a kid named Private First Class Danny Chen, 19 years old and 3 weeks in country. He talked nervously to fill the silence, sharing stories about his family in California, his girlfriend back home, his plans after his deployment. Maya listened with half her attention while the other half monitored the darkness through her night vision goggles. At 2:37 hours, she saw it. A thermal signature, low and slow, moving through the dead ground 400 meters out. Then another, and another. 6 fighters total, carrying what looked like mortar tubes and ammunition. "Chen," she said quietly, "radio the TOC. 6 enemy personnel, grid November Victor 7241, moving south-southwest toward attack position Bravo." Chen fumbled with the radio, his voice cracking with adrenaline as he reported the contact. The Tactical Operations Center acknowledged but seemed unconcerned. Enemy movement at night was constant. Unless they were actively attacking, the protocol was to monitor and report. But Maya's instincts screamed danger. These weren't random fighters. Their movement was too disciplined, too purposeful. They were setting up for something big. "We need to engage," she told Chen. "What? No way. We don't have authorization. Rules of engagement say we need hostile intent or hostile action before." The first mortar round shrieked overhead and detonated in the center of the base. Then all hell broke loose. The night exploded with orange fire and chaos. Mortars rained down in a devastating barrage, hitting fuel depots, command posts, barracks. Secondary explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. Soldiers scrambled from their tents, some on fire, others dragging wounded comrades. The Taliban had been planning this for weeks, pre-sighting their targets, waiting for the perfect moment. And now they were systematically destroying Fob's spearpoint. Chen stood frozen, overwhelmed by the violence erupting around them. Maya grabbed the M240, but the machine gun was positioned to cover the perimeter, not the mortar position behind them. Useless. She needed her rifle. "Stay here and return fire if they assault the wire," she ordered Chen, then slid down the ladder before he could protest. The base was pandemonium. Soldiers ran in every direction. Officers screamed contradictory orders. A fuel truck burned with apocalyptic intensity, throwing mad shadows across the chaos. Maya sprinted toward the barracks where she'd stashed her personal rifle, a custom-built precision weapon she'd smuggled in piece by piece, disguised as spare parts. She assembled it in 45 seconds flat. Scope, bolt, magazine, each component clicked into place with familiar certainty. Back outside, she climbed onto the roof of the nearest building, finding a firing position with a clear line of sight to the ridgeline where the mortar team operated. Through her scope, she could see them clearly, 6 fighters illuminated by their own muzzle flashes, completely confident they were beyond effective range of the base's weapons. They were wrong. Maya's first shot dropped the mortar team leader at 847 meters. The insurgents scattered in confusion, trying to locate the shooter. Her second shot took the assistant gunner. The third hit an ammunition handler. They abandoned their position, dragging their wounded, leaving behind the mortar tubes that had been killing Americans just seconds before. The barrage stopped. Silence fell over the base, broken only by the crackle of flames and the moans of wounded soldiers. Maya descended from her perch and began moving toward the medical tent to help with casualties. Commander Hartwick appeared through the smoke, his face blackened with soot, his eyes wild with adrenaline and fury. Who stopped that mortar team? Which tower had eyes on them? Soldiers looked at each other, confused. The towers hadn't engaged. It had been too far, too dark, impossible shots. Sergeant Kowalski, the base's senior sniper, emerged from cover. He'd been examining the abandoned mortar position through binoculars. "Sir, whoever made those shots, they were firing from inside the wire at extreme range. 8, maybe 900 meters. In the dark, 3 for 3. I've never seen anything like it." Hartwick's gaze swept the assembled soldiers and locked onto Maya, standing calmly with her rifle slung across her chest. His expression transformed from confusion to realization, to something harder to define, suspicion mixed with unwilling respect. "Reeves, it wasn't a question." "Sir." "My office now." As Maya walked toward the command post, soldiers parted before her, staring like she just performed a magic trick they couldn't explain. Kowalski fell into step beside her, studying her with the analytical gaze of a professional evaluating another professional. "Where'd you train?" he asked quietly. Maya kept walking, Fort Bennying same as everyone else. "Bullshit." She didn't respond, didn't need to. In Hartwick's office, the commander stood behind his desk, his hands gripping the edge hard enough to whiten his knuckles. The tactical map behind him showed the base's defenses, the enemy positions, the terrain that had been killing his soldiers for months. "Explain those shots," he demanded. "Taliban mortar team was targeting the base from grid November Victor 7241. I engaged and neutralized the threat. 3 confirmed kills, remaining personnel fled the position." "I can read a goddamn after-action report, Sergeant. What I want to know is how a signals intelligence specialist, who I assigned to kitchen duty and perimeter security, makes 3 precision shots at extreme range in total darkness, with what appears to be a personally owned weapon that's not on any armory inventory list." Maya met his gaze steadily. "I saw the threat. I engaged it. I eliminated it. Isn't that what soldiers are supposed to do, sir?" Hartwick's jaw worked silently. He wanted to explode, to tear into her for insubordination, for using unauthorized weapons, for making him look like a fool who'd wasted his best asset on washing dishes. But he couldn't, because she just saved dozens of lives and stopped an attack that could have overrun the entire base. Finally, he spoke through gritted teeth. "You're reassigned. Effective immediately, you're attached to Sergeant Kowalski's sniper team for evaluation. If he says you're not up to standard, you're on the next helicopter back to Bagram for a very long conversation with very angry officers about regulations and chain of command. Understood?" "Understood, sir." "Dismissed." As Maya left, she allowed herself the smallest smile. She was in. Finally, she could hunt. Dawn broke cold and unforgiving over Fob Spearpoint. Maya stood in the armory with Sergeant First Class Jake Kowalski, a man whose reputation preceded him like a shadow. 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, 43 confirmed kills, and a Distinguished Service Cross for actions he never talked about. His eyes were the color of winter ice, and they studied Maya with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey or competition. "Let me be clear about something, Reeves," Kowalski said, loading magazines with methodical precision. "I don't care what you did 3 nights ago. Lucky shots happen. Adrenaline, chance, divine intervention, whatever. What matters is consistency. Can you perform when it counts every single time without fail? Yes, Sergeant. We'll see. He tossed her a range card and topographic map. We're running Overwatch for a clearance operation in the Tangi Valley, village called Akbar Kel, 10 clicks northeast. Intelligence says Taliban are using it as a staging area. Alpha Company goes in at 800, we provide support. Brief me on your plan. Maya studied the map for 90 seconds, her mind processing terrain, angles, and tactical considerations with the speed of a supercomputer. Primary position here, she pointed to a ridgeline overlooking the village. Elevation advantage, clear fields of fire, multiple egress routes. Secondary position here if we're compromised. I'd recommend insertion at 600 to allow time for proper hide construction and target area familiarization before Alpha steps off. Kowalski's eyebrow raised fractionally. Wind reading. Valley terrain creates unpredictable thermal currents. Anticipate variable winds, stronger as the sun heats the ground. We'll need to adjust constantly. I'd also recommend we position with the sun behind us to reduce scope glare and blind potential counter-snipers. Ammunition load. 60 rounds primary, 40 rounds secondary weapon, plus 20 rounds of M118 LR for extended range engagements if needed. Kowalski almost smiled. Almost. You've done this before. A few times, Sergeant. They loaded into a Humvee with 2 infantry soldiers providing security, Corporal Martinez and Specialist Hayes, both veterans who'd worked with Kowalski before. The respect they showed him was evident in their silence and efficiency. The skepticism they showed Maya was equally evident in their sidelong glances and exchanged looks. The movement to the observation position took 2 hours of careful navigation through hostile terrain. Kowalski set a brutal pace, testing Maya's physical conditioning. 75 pounds of gear in mountain altitude. She kept up without complaint, controlling her breathing, placing her feet carefully, maintaining tactical spacing. They reached the primary position at 5:47 hours and immediately began constructing a hide, camouflage netting, natural vegetation, careful positioning to break up their silhouette against the sky. Maya worked with practiced efficiency that made Kowalski's eyes narrow with renewed suspicion. "How long were you really at Benying?" he asked. "Long enough, Sergeant." By 7:30 they were invisible. Through their scopes, the village below looked peaceful, mud brick compounds, narrow streets, a few early risers beginning their day. But Maya's trained eye caught details others would miss. Fighting-age males moving with military precision, weapons poorly concealed under robes, windows and doors positioned for defensive fire. 12 probable hostiles, she whispered. Compound 3 has a PKM machine gun position on the roof, camouflaged but visible by the barrel shadow. Compound 7 shows recent fortification, sandbags covered with plaster to look like walls. Vehicle in the courtyard has new tires but old body, suggests it's operational despite appearance. Kowalski verified each observation through his own scope. She was right, on everything. At 800, Alpha Company began their movement into the village. The tension was palpable even from 800 meters away. Every window could hide a rifle. Every doorway could conceal a bomb. Then the radio crackled with urgency. "Overwatch, this is Alpha 6. We have a situation. How copy?" "Alpha 6, this is Overwatch. Good copy. Send it." "We've got 12 Green Berets held hostage in Compound 9. Repeat, friendly forces held captive. Intel just came through. They were grabbed 3 days ago during a reconnaissance patrol. Taliban are using them as human shields. We need immediate sniper support." Kowalski's jaw tightened. He swung his scope to Compound 9 and cursed under his breath. Through her own optic, Maya saw the nightmare scenario. A large room with windows facing their position. 6 American soldiers visible, hands bound, kneeling in a line. Behind them stood a Taliban fighter holding what appeared to be a remote detonator, his thumb hovering over the trigger. The room was rigged with explosives. She could see the det cord running along the walls, the shaped charges positioned to kill everyone inside. Range to target, Kowalski muttered, more to himself than to Maya. 1,843 meters, she replied instantly. Wind currently 7 knots east-northeast, but gusting unpredictably. Elevation angle negative 15 degrees. Single window approximately 40 centimeters wide. Target is standing behind the hostages, partially concealed. Available shot corridor approximately 6 inches. 6 inches, Kowalski repeated flatly. At 1,800 meters, with variable wind, through a window without hitting the detonator or any hostages. He looked at her. That's not a shot, that's suicide. But Maya was already calculating. The insurgent shifted every 12 seconds, a nervous habit, a pattern. For approximately 2 seconds of each cycle, his head was exposed in the gap between 2 hostages. 2 seconds. 1 shot. If the bullet was off by even 3 inches, it would hit a hostage or miss entirely, and the insurgent would trigger the bomb. Alpha Company's commander came back on the radio, his voice tight with stress. Overwatch, Taliban are making demands. We've got 10 minutes before they start executing hostages. Can you take the shot? Kowalski stared through his scope, running calculations, considering angles. Finally, he keyed his radio. Negative Alpha 6. Shot is not viable. Repeat, not viable. Wind conditions and target distance make the probability of success unacceptably low. Understood, preparing for negotiation. But Maya had already made her decision. She'd seen this scenario before. Different country, different hostages, different terrorist, but the same impossible choice. 3 years ago in Helmand Province, she'd hesitated, waited for authorization, followed protocol, and she'd watched through her scope as the insurgents executed 2 Marines before help arrived. Never again. Let me take it, she said quietly. Kowalski turned to her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. Did you not hear me? The shot is impossible. The wind alone makes it a coin flip, and that's before accounting for the target size, the angle, and the fact that if you miss by even a fraction, you kill Americans. I won't miss. You can't possibly guarantee. I can. Maya's voice carried absolute certainty. I've made harder shots in worse conditions. Give me the rifle. No, absolutely not. I'm not letting some rookie make a hero play that gets 6 Green Berets killed. Maya turned to face him fully, and for the first time, Kowalski saw something in her eyes that made him go still. It wasn't arrogance or bravado. It was the calm, cold certainty of someone who'd walked through fire and come out the other side carrying ghosts. Sergeant Kowalski, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I have 93 confirmed kills across 7 countries you've never heard of in conditions that would make this look easy. I've threaded bullets through smaller gaps at longer ranges with worse equipment. I know you don't believe me. I know my file doesn't show it. But in about 8 minutes, one of those hostages is going to die unless someone takes this shot. And I'm someone who can. The radio crackled again. Overwatch, Taliban just executed 1 hostage. Repeat, 1 friendly KIA. They're giving us 5 minutes for the remaining 5. Kowalski's hands were shaking, not with fear, but with the weight of the decision. 6 lives. 5 now. All depending on whether he trusted a woman he'd known for less than 12 hours, whose claims seemed impossible, whose very presence violated everything he thought he knew about military capabilities. But he'd seen her shoot, those 3 Mordor men in the darkness, perfect shots under pressure. And he saw something else now, the absolute stillness of a true professional. Her breathing was controlled. Her heart rate probably hadn't elevated even 5 beats per minute. While his own adrenaline spiked, she was entering the zone where time slowed and the world narrowed to crosshairs and calculations. If you miss, he started. I won't. 4 minutes left. Kowalski made the hardest decision of his career. Take the shot. Maya settled behind the rifle, her body conforming to the weapon like they were one entity. Through the scope, she watched the insurgent's pattern. Shift, pause, 12 seconds, like clockwork. She calculated everything. The 175-grain Sierra Matchking bullet would drop approximately 97 feet over 1,800 meters. The wind would push it approximately 14 inches right, but the gusts made it variable. She'd need to shoot during a lull. The angle would affect the trajectory. The glass window would deflect the bullet minimally but measurably. Her heart rate, 52 beats per minute. Her breathing, slow, controlled, meditative. The insurgent shifted. 2 seconds of exposure, not yet, wind gust. Shift 2 seconds, still not optimal. Shift 2 seconds, wind lull perfect. Maya exhaled halfway and squeezed the trigger with the same gentle pressure you'd use to hold a butterfly. The rifle bucked, the world held its breath. 1,843 meters away, the 175-grain bullet punched through the window, deflected 3 degrees left as expected, and entered the insurgent's skull precisely 1 inch above his right eye. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, the detonator falling harmlessly from his dead hand. Through the scope, Maya watched Alpha Company's breachers storm the compound, cutting the hostages free, sweeping for additional threats. The radio erupted with voices. Hostages secure, all remaining personnel alive. What the hell was that shot? Kowalski lowered his binoculars, his hands still trembling. He looked at Maya, who was calmly clearing her rifle, her expression unchanged. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Maya met his eyes. "Just a soldier, Sergeant, just a soldier doing her job." But they both knew that was a lie. And somewhere in the mountains, Commander Zarif was listening to reports of an impossible shot made by a ghost he thought he'd killed 3 years ago. The hunter had announced her presence. Now the real game would begin. The extraction back to Fob Spearpoint was conducted in absolute silence. Kowalski sat across from Maya in the Humvee, his eyes never leaving her face, searching for answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. Corporal Martinez and Specialist Hayes kept stealing glances at her like she just performed a miracle they'd witnessed but couldn't explain. The impossible shot was already becoming legend. By the time they rolled through the gate, half the base had heard some version of what happened. The stories grew with each retelling. Some said it was 2,000 meters. Others claimed she'd shot through 2 windows. A few swore she'd made the shot without even using a scope. Maya ignored it all, methodically cleaning her rifle in silence while Kowalski filed his after-action report. Commander Hartwick was waiting in the Tactical Operations Center, surrounded by staff officers reviewing helmet camera footage from Alpha Company's breach. The video showed everything: the hostages bound and terrified, the insurgent with the detonator, and then the sudden spray of blood as his head snapped back from an invisible bullet. "Run it again," Hartwick ordered for the 3rd time. They watched the insurgent fall, frame by frame. The detonator tumbled from his hand, landing harmlessly on the floor. The hostages flinched at the gunshot they couldn't place. Alpha Company's breacher team crashed through the door seconds later. "Satellite confirms the shot origin," an intelligence officer reported. "Overwatch position was 1,843 meters from target. Wind was variable, 7 to 12 knots. Target exposure time was approximately 2 seconds. Hartwick's jaw clenched, and Kowalski confirmed that Reeves made the shot. "Yes, sir. He's outside waiting to brief you personally." "Send him in, and bring Reeves too." When they entered, Hartwick dismissed everyone else from the TOC. The door closed, leaving just the 3 of them surrounded by maps, monitors, and the heavy weight of unasked questions. "Sergeant Kowalski," Hartwick began, his voice carefully controlled, "in your professional opinion as a qualified sniper instructor with 12 years of experience, was that shot possible?" Kowalski chose his words carefully. Sir, in standard conditions, I would say no. The distance, wind, target size, and exposure time created a probability of success that I initially calculated at less than 15%. That's why I called it non-viable. But she made it. Yes, sir. Not only made it, but executed it with a level of precision I've never witnessed. The bullet entered exactly where it needed to, high enough to ensure instant brain death and prevent any muscle spasm that might trigger the detonator, but low enough to clear the hostage positioned behind the target. Hartwick turned to Maya. How? Sir, how did you make that shot? What training, what experience, what classified program did you come from that I don't know about? Maya's expression remained neutral. I assessed the situation, calculated the variables, and executed the shot to the best of my ability, sir. I got lucky. Lucky, Hartwick repeated, his voice rising. You got lucky, at 1,800 meters, in variable wind, through a 6-inch window, saving 5 Green Berets who are alive right now because you got lucky. Yes, sir. Hartwick slammed his hand on the table, making Kowalski flinch. Maya didn't move. I've been in this army for 23 years. I know what luck looks like, and I know what elite training looks like. That shot wasn't luck. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want the truth. What is your real background? Before Maya could answer, the TOC door burst open. A young lieutenant entered, out of breath. Sir, urgent flash traffic from JSOC. They're requesting immediate secure communication with you regarding the hostage rescue operation. Hartwick's eyes narrowed. Tell them I'll call back in 10 minutes. Sir, they said it's time sensitive, specifically regarding Staff Sergeant Reeves. The room went cold. Maya's heart rate, which had remained calm throughout the interrogation, finally elevated. JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. The umbrella organization that controlled Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, and other units that officially didn't exist, including the intelligence support activity. Including Phantom. Hartwick picked up the secure phone, entering his authentication codes. This is Spearpoint 6, authenticated Bravo 7 Delta 29er. Go ahead. Maya couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Hartwick's face transform from anger to confusion to shock. His eyes kept flicking to her as whoever was on the other end spoke. I understand, Hartwick said finally, and her operational parameters, a pause, classified, of course. Another pause. No, sir, I was not briefed prior to her arrival. His knuckles whitened on the phone. Yes, sir, I'll ensure full cooperation. Spearpoint 6 out. He hung up and stared at Maya for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, still hard, but now edged with something else. Respect, fear, maybe both. Sergeant Kowalski, you're dismissed. Everything you saw and heard today is classified. You will not discuss Staff Sergeant Reeves' capabilities with anyone. That's a direct order. Sir, I. Dismissed, Sergeant. Kowalski left, casting one last bewildered look at Maya before the door closed behind him. Hartwick circled around his desk, leaning against it, studying Maya like she was a puzzle he'd been assembling wrong. That was a 2-star general from JSOC. He very politely told me to stop asking questions about your background, to give you whatever operational support you require, and to never, under any circumstances, file any official paperwork about your activities here. Maya said nothing. He also told me, Hartwick continued, that you're here tracking a high-value target, someone who's been operating in this area for the past 6 weeks, someone that conventional forces haven't been able to touch. Commander Zarif, Maya said quietly. Hartwick's eyebrows shot up. So you know, Zarif is responsible for 17 coalition deaths in the past month alone. He's a ghost, shows up, hits us, disappears into the mountains. My best intelligence analysts can't predict his movements. My best trackers can't follow his trail. He's making me look like an amateur. He paused. What's your connection to him? Maya's composure finally cracked just slightly. A muscle in her jaw twitched. 3 years ago, Zarif ambushed my team in Helmand province. I was the only survivor. He left me for dead, but I lived. I've been tracking him ever since. Revenge mission, Hartwick said flatly. Justice mission, Maya corrected. Zarif isn't just a Taliban commander. He's a facilitator for foreign fighters, a coordinator for suicide bombers, and a strategist who's killed more Americans than most people realize. Taking him off the board isn't personal. It's tactical necessity. That's a nice rationalization, but we both know this is personal. Maya didn't deny it. Hartwick walked to the window, looking out at his base, at the soldiers who trusted him to keep them alive, at the defenses that seemed increasingly inadequate against an enemy who always stayed one step ahead. 3 weeks ago, Zarif's fighters hit one of our supply convoys, killed 4 soldiers, wounded 6 more. 2 weeks ago, they ambushed a patrol, 2 more dead. Last week, they mortared this base and nearly overran our perimeter. He turned back to face her. I've tried everything. Drones, informants, special operations raids. He's always gone before we arrive. It's like he knows our plans before we execute them. He probably does, Maya said. Zarif has been fighting Americans for 15 years. He understands how we think, how we operate. He knows our doctrine better than most soldiers. That's why conventional approaches won't work. And you think you can succeed where everyone else has failed. I don't think, sir, I know, because Zarif has one weakness he doesn't know about. What's that? Maya's eyes turned cold. He thinks I'm dead. That gives me an advantage that no one else has, the element of complete surprise. He's been operating without fear of the one person who actually has the skills to kill him. Hartwick processed this. Outside, he could hear the normal sounds of the base, helicopters, voices, equipment. But inside this room, the conversation had entered territory that made him deeply uncomfortable. He was a conventional officer. He believed in chain of command, proper channels, following regulations. But he was also a combat commander who'd lost too many soldiers to an enemy he couldn't pin down. What do you need from me? He asked finally. Access to all intelligence on Zarif's movements. Freedom to operate independently without questions about where I'm going or what I'm doing. And when the time comes, a quick reaction force ready to exploit whatever opportunity I create. That's asking me to give you a blank check. Yes, sir, it is. Hartwick wrestled with the decision. Every protocol screamed at him to refuse, to follow proper channels, to kick this problem up the chain of command and let someone else make the call. But that shot today, 1,843 meters, 5 lives saved. The kind of operator who could make that shot didn't come from normal channels, and maybe fighting a ghost required another ghost. You get your access, he said finally. But understand this, I'm responsible for every soldier on this base. If your personal vendetta gets any of my people killed, I don't care what classified unit you came from. I will end your career. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. Good. Intelligence briefing is at 1800 hours. Be there. He paused. And Reeves, that shot today, I've never seen anything like it. Whatever happens next, those 5 green berets get to go home because of you. That counts for something. Maya nodded and left, her mind already shifting to the next phase. The hostage rescue had been a necessary diversion, but it wasn't why she was here. Somewhere in these mountains, Zarif was planning his next attack. And now, finally, Maya had the resources and freedom to hunt him properly. As she walked across the base, soldiers stared and whispered. The legend of the impossible shot was spreading faster than she'd anticipated. That would bring complications, increased visibility, more questions, potential exposure of her true identity. But it also brought something else, fear. By tomorrow, word would reach Taliban networks. Stories of an American sniper who could hit targets at impossible ranges, who appeared from nowhere, who killed with surgical precision. stories that would eventually reach Zaref. And when he heard them, somewhere deep in his tactical mind, a small doubt would form, because Zaref had seen only one other operator who could shoot like that. An operator he'd killed 3 years ago. Or so he thought. Maya smiled grimly. The psychological warfare had begun. Let him wonder, let him doubt, let him start looking over his shoulder. Because Phantom was hunting again. And this time, she wasn't going to miss. The intelligence briefing at 1800 hours revealed what Maya had suspected. Commander Zaref was far more sophisticated than a typical Taliban field commander. The ops officer displayed a map covered with red pins marking attacks over the past 6 months. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone trained in asymmetric warfare. Zaref was conducting a systematic campaign to isolate Fob Spearpoint, cutting supply routes, degrading morale, and preparing for something larger. He's not just harassing us, Maya said, studying the map. He's shaping the battlefield for a major assault. Hartwick's intelligence officer, a captain named Morrison, nodded reluctantly. We've reached the same conclusion, but we can't pin down his location. He never uses cell phones, never stays in one place more than a night, and his security is airtight. Maya traced her finger along the map, following the attack patterns. Zaref was disciplined, but discipline created patterns, and patterns could be exploited. What about human intelligence, local informants? Morrison's expression darkened. We had 3. Zaref executed them publicly last month, cut their tongues out first, then their heads. The message was clear: no one talks to Americans and lives. Supply lines, Maya asked. Even ghosts need food, ammunition, medical supplies. We've tried interdicting his logistics. He's using multiple small caches scattered throughout the mountains instead of centralized depots. We find one, he's already moved to another. Maya leaned back, her mind working through the problem from every angle. Traditional intelligence methods weren't working because Zaref was too smart, too experienced. But everyone had vulnerabilities. The question was finding his. That night Maya couldn't sleep. She lay on her bunk reviewing everything she knew about Zaref, not just from intelligence reports but from personal experience. 3 years ago in Helmand, she'd tracked him for 2 weeks before the ambush. She'd learned his habits, his decision-making patterns, the way he thought about terrain and timing. He was methodical, patient. He never took unnecessary risks, and he had one weakness he probably didn't even recognize: arrogance. Zaref believed he was untouchable because he'd survived this long. That confidence made him predictable in subtle ways. At 300 hours, her instincts screamed warning. Something was wrong. The base was too quiet. She rose from her bunk, pulled on her boots, and grabbed her rifle. Outside, the perimeter guards walked their posts normally. Everything appeared routine. But Maya had learned to trust her instincts. They'd kept her alive in situations where logic and training had failed. She climbed to the roof of the nearest building, scanning the dark perimeter with her night vision scope. Nothing, just empty desert and distant mountains. Yet the feeling persisted. They were being watched. Then she saw it. A thermal signature on a ridgeline 3,000 meters out. Someone with binoculars or a spotting scope observing the base. The signature disappeared almost immediately, but Maya had seen enough. They were being surveilled right now. She grabbed her radio. TOC, this is Reeves. We have enemy observation post, grid Papa Tango 8735, range 3,000 meters. Recommend immediate. The explosion cut her off. A suicide vehicle-borne IED crashed through the western gate in a fireball that lit up the night sky. The blast wave knocked Maya off her feet, sending her tumbling across the roof. Her ears rang with high-pitched whining as secondary explosions erupted. Fuel drums, ammunition, carefully placed charges that had been smuggled onto the base somehow. Zaref wasn't just observing. This was a coordinated assault. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as Taliban fighters poured through the breached gate. Maya rolled to her stomach, bringing her rifle up, acquiring targets. 3 insurgents moving through the smoke. She dropped them in quick succession, then shifted position as incoming fire chewed up the roofline where she'd been lying. This was worse than a typical attack. This was a deliberate attempt to overrun the entire base. Maya sprinted across rooftops, using elevation to identify enemy positions. She counted at least 40 insurgents inside the wire, with more providing suppressing fire from outside. The base defenders were fighting back hard, but they'd been caught off guard. Soldiers scrambled from barracks half-dressed, grabbing weapons, trying to organize a coherent defense. Through her scope, Maya spotted a Taliban fighter directing the assault with hand signals, clearly a commander or senior leader. She put a bullet through his chest at 400 meters. The attack wavered momentarily as fighters looked for new direction. Then she saw him. Even at 800 meters, even through smoke and chaos, Maya recognized Zarif's distinctive movement pattern. He stood on the same ridgeline where she'd spotted the thermal signature, observing his assault, coordinating via radio. Their eyes met across the distance, impossible at that range, but Maya felt it in her bones. Recognition, understanding, the hunter and the hunted acknowledging each other. Zarif raised something to his face, binoculars. He was studying her specifically. Maya's blood ran cold. He knew. Somehow, he'd identified her. Maybe the stories about the impossible shot had reached him faster than she'd anticipated. Maybe he'd recognized her shooting style, her tactical positioning. Or maybe he'd simply felt the same instinctive recognition she had. She lined up the shot, center mass, compensating for range and wind. Her finger began applying pressure to the trigger. Zarif smiled. She could see it even at this distance. Then he spoke into his radio. Every Taliban fighter on the base suddenly shifted their fire toward Maya's position. Dozens of rifles and machine guns concentrated on her rooftop. Bullets shredded the air around her, fragmenting concrete, kicking up sparks and dust. Maya dove for cover, rolling behind an air conditioning unit as rounds punched through it like paper. This wasn't random fire. This was targeted, coordinated. Zarif had identified her as the primary threat and was directing his entire assault element to eliminate her. She low-crawled to the roof's edge and dropped to the ground, landing hard but rolling with the impact. Around her, Fob's spearpoint was a war zone. The defenders were slowly organizing, establishing firing positions, calling for artillery support. But the base was in real danger of being overrun. Maya needed to change the calculus. She sprinted toward the armory, dodging fire, using smoke and darkness for concealment. Inside, she grabbed an M4 carbine and loaded up with additional magazines. The precision rifle was perfect for long-range work, but in close combat, she needed volume of fire. She exited the armory and immediately engaged 3 insurgents trying to flank the command post. Her M4 barked in controlled bursts, double tap, shift, double tap. They went down. More Taliban fighters emerged from the smoke. Maya moved like water, flowing from position to position, never staying static, always attacking from unexpected angles. Years of close-quarters combat training took over, muscle memory refined through countless operations in places that didn't officially exist. She flanked a machine gun position and eliminated the crew before they even knew she was there. She cleared 2 buildings where insurgents had taken position, her movements economical and lethal. She rescued 3 wounded soldiers pinned down by enemy fire, killing their attackers and dragging the casualties to safety. Through it all, she could feel Zarif watching, evaluating, recognizing the operator he thought he'd killed 3 years ago. The battle raged for 43 minutes before the Taliban withdrew, dragging their dead and wounded back through the breached gate. American artillery and mortar fire pursued them into the darkness, but Zaref's fighters melted into the mountains like ghosts. When silence finally fell, Fob's spearpoint looked like a disaster zone. Buildings burned. Wounded soldiers screamed for medics. The western gate was a smoking crater. Maya found Hartwick in the TOC, coordinating casualty evacuation and damage assessment. His face was blackened with soot, and blood ran from a cut on his forehead, but his eyes were sharp with adrenaline. "Casualty count?" Maya asked. 7 dead, 19 wounded. Could have been worse, a lot worse. He looked at her with new understanding. "I watched you on the security cameras. The way you moved, the way you fought, that's not standard infantry tactics. That's something else entirely." Before Maya could respond, Corporal Hayes burst into the TOC, his face pale. "Sir, you need to see this. We found something on one of the dead Taliban fighters." He handed Hartwick a blood-stained envelope. Inside was a single photograph. Of Maya. It was an old photo, 3 years old from her time with the intelligence support activity. She was in civilian clothes, somewhere in the Middle East, her face partially obscured by sunglasses, but it was unmistakably her. Written across the bottom in English, "The Phantom Lives, 50,000 USD reward, alive only." Hartwick's hands trembled slightly as he handed the photo to Maya. "He knows you're here and he wants you alive." His voice dropped. "Why alive? Why not just kill you?" Maya stared at the photograph, her mind racing through implications. Zaref wanting her alive meant this wasn't just about revenge. He had plans for her. Interrogation, torture, a public execution to demoralize American forces and prove that even elite operators could be broken. Or something worse. "Because," Maya said quietly, 3 years ago I was the only person who ever got close enough to kill him. I infiltrated his inner circle, posed as a journalist sympathetic to his cause. I sat across from him at dinner, close enough to smell his cologne. I had a knife strapped to my ankle and orders to assassinate him that night." Hartwick's eyes widened. "What happened?" "Someone in our chain of command was compromised. Zaref was warned 30 minutes before I made my move. The ambush that killed my team wasn't random. It was specifically designed to capture or kill me. I only survived because I took 3 bullets and they assumed I'd bled out." She looked up from the photograph, her expression hardening. "Zaref has spent 3 years wondering if I was really dead. Now he knows I'm alive and he wants answers. Who sent me? What intelligence did I gather? Who else in his organization might be compromised? And most importantly, he wants the psychological victory of breaking the operator who got closer to killing him than anyone else ever has." So this whole assault tonight was partially about testing base defenses, but mostly it was about confirming I was here and sending me a message. Maya crumpled the photograph in her fist. "He's trying to draw me out, make me come after him on his terms in terrain he controls." Hartwick shook his head. "Then we don't play his game. We keep you inside the wire, heavily guarded, and wait for a better opportunity." Maya smiled without humor. "Sir, with respect, that's exactly what he expects. He thinks I'll be cautious, calculated, patient, that I'll wait for perfect conditions. And you're not going to do that." "No, sir, I'm going to give Zaref exactly what he wants. I'm going hunting, tonight." "That's insane. It's obviously a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Maya agreed. "But sometimes the best way to spring a trap is to walk into it deliberately and be more dangerous than whatever's waiting inside." Hartwick studied her for a long moment. He saw determination in her eyes, yes, but also something deeper. A wound that had never fully healed. A debt that demanded payment. This was what Maya had been preparing for across 3 years and a dozen cover identities. This was her reason for existing. "What do you need?" he asked, knowing he was possibly sending her to her death. Maya's smile turned predatory. "Just what I came with, sir. 1 rifle, 1 mission, and the element of surprise." Outside, the mountains waited in darkness. Somewhere out there, Zarif was celebrating his successful assault and planning his next move. He had no idea that the ghost he tried to kill 3 years ago was coming for him. And this time, Phantom wasn't going to miss. Maya prepared for the hunt with ritualistic precision. In the dim light of the armory, she laid out her equipment: rifle, scope, ammunition, survival gear, medical supplies, and the one item she'd carried for 3 years, a tarnished metal dog tag that didn't belong to her. It bore the name SSG Michael Torres. Her spotter, her friend, the first person Zarif had executed during the ambush in Helmand. She touched the tag briefly, then secured it inside her vest. For Mike, for all of them. Kowalski found her as she was conducting final weapons checks. You're really going out there alone, into terrain crawling with hostiles who have your photograph and a bounty on your head. That's the plan, Sergeant. That's not a plan. That's suicide with extra steps. He sat down across from her, his expression troubled. Look, I don't know your whole story, and maybe I don't need to, but I've been doing this long enough to recognize someone on a death mission when I see it. Maya met his eyes. I'm not planning to die, Sergeant. I'm planning to finish what I started 3 years ago. By walking into an obvious trap. By using Zarif's arrogance against him. He thinks I'll be emotional, reckless, easy to predict because I want revenge. But revenge is cold, Sergeant. It requires patience and precision. She finished loading her magazines. Zarif made one critical mistake tonight. He showed me he's still in this area. That narrows his possible locations to maybe 15 square kilometers. He can't resist the opportunity to capture me personally, which means he won't run. He'll set his trap and wait. And you'll just walk into it. No, I'll appear to walk into it while actually setting my own trap inside his. Maya stood, slinging her rifle. Zarif is brilliant at asymmetric warfare, but he has a weakness: ego. He needs to prove he's smarter than his enemies. That need will make him predictable. Kowalski shook his head in reluctant admiration. You're either the craziest person I've ever met or the most dangerous. I honestly can't tell which. Both, probably. She started to leave, but Kowalski stopped her. Wait, I'm coming with you. No. That wasn't a request for permission. You need a spotter, someone to watch your back, and I'm the best qualified person on this base. Sergeant, this isn't your fight. The hell it isn't, Kowalski interrupted, his voice hard. Zarif killed 7 of my brothers tonight. He's been bleeding this base for months. And whether you like it or not, you're one of us now. Rangers don't leave Rangers behind, even if that Ranger is actually some spooky operator from a unit that doesn't officially exist. Maya hesitated. Part of her wanted to refuse, to keep this mission solitary and contained. But another part, the part that had lost an entire team 3 years ago, recognized the value of having someone she could trust at her back. All right, she said finally, but we do this my way. No questions, no hesitation, and if I give you an order, you follow it immediately. Understood? Understood. They moved out at 2100 hours, slipping through the damaged western gate under cover of darkness. The base was still dealing with casualties and damage assessment. No one noticed 2 figures disappearing into the night. The mountains swallowed them quickly. Maya navigated by memory and instinct, moving through terrain that would kill most people through simple navigation errors. Kowalski followed, impressed despite himself at her ability to move silently over loose shale and rocky ground. After 2 hours of careful movement, Maya held up a fist. Stop. She'd found what she was looking for, a game trail showing recent boot prints. Multiple people moving in tactical formation. Taliban fighters, probably part of Zarif's security element. She keyed her radio to the encrypted frequency. Spearpoint TOC, this is Phantom. I have enemy trail, grid November Tango 4782. Approximately 20 personnel moving northwest. Request UAV overwatch if available. Hartwick's voice came back immediately. Phantom, we have Predator overhead. Thermal is showing significant heat signatures in the valley 2 clicks north of your position. Looks like a temporary camp, maybe 40 to 50 personnel. That's the target. Keep the drone high. I don't want Zarif spooked by engine noise. Copy. Be advised, intelligence intercepts suggest Zarif is expecting you. They're talking about the ghost woman on unsecured radio frequencies. It's deliberate. They want you to know they're ready. Good. Overconfidence is exploitable. Phantom out. Maya and Kowalski moved closer to the camp, taking 3 more hours to cover 2 kilometers. Speed was less important than stealth. They were outnumbered 20 to 1 at minimum. One mistake would be fatal. Finally, they reached a ridgeline overlooking the valley. Below, illuminated by carefully shielded campfires, was Zarif's temporary base. Taliban fighters moved between tents and fighting positions. Sentries walked predictable patterns, and in the center, in the largest tent, Maya could see shadows of multiple people in what appeared to be a command meeting. She settled into a hide position and began methodical observation, cataloging everything through her scope: guard rotations, weapons placements, communication equipment, escape routes. Textbook ambush setup, Kowalski whispered. They've got kill zones covering every approach, heavy weapons positioned to interlock fire. This whole valley is a death trap. Agreed, which is why we're not going down there. Then what? Kowalski stopped as understanding dawned. You're going to draw them out. Zarif wants me, he can come get me, on terrain I choose at a time I dictate. Maya keyed her radio again. Spearpoint TOC, I need a fire mission. High explosive, time on target 0430 hours. I'm sending coordinates now. Phantom, that's danger close to your position. If you're not clear of the blast radius. I'll be clear. Just make sure your timing is perfect. And I need one more thing. Have Captain Mills prepare a quick reaction force. 8 operators, 2 vehicles, ready to move on my signal. They'll insert at grid Papa Lima 7195 at exactly 0445. There was a pause, then Hartwick's voice, you're using yourself as bait. Affirmative, Zarif wants the Phantom. He's about to get her, but not the way he expects. Maya spent the next hour preparing her battlefield. She identified 3 firing positions, pre-ranged distances to key terrain features, and planned movement routes that would allow her to control the engagement. This was her element, turning chaos into calculated lethality. At 400 hours, she fired a single shot. The round punched through the tent where Zarif's command element was meeting, deliberately missing everyone, but announcing her presence unmistakably. Immediately, the camp erupted into controlled chaos. Fighters grabbed weapons and began moving toward her position with trained efficiency. Maya fired twice more, hitting a generator and a fuel drum. The explosions created confusion and backlit targets perfectly. Spearpoint fire mission execute now, she radioed. 30 seconds later, artillery rounds screamed overhead and impacted the valley floor. The explosions were perfectly timed, devastating the camp's infrastructure but allowing most personnel to escape toward hardened positions, exactly as Maya had calculated. The Taliban fighters did precisely what she expected. They assaulted toward her position, trying to capture or kill the sniper who terrorized them. 40 men moving uphill through terrain they knew well, confident in their numerical superiority. But Maya wasn't where they expected. She'd already displaced to her secondary position, 300 meters east. From there, she had a perfect enfilade shot on the assault force as they climbed toward her primary hide. Kowalski called targets. Multiple personnel, 900 meters, moving in column formation. Maya began firing. 1 shot, 1 kill, shift. 1 shot, 1 kill, shift. The Taliban fighters scattered trying to locate her new position, but the terrain and darkness made it nearly impossible. She fired 12 rounds in 90 seconds, then displaced again to her third position. The Taliban were now trapped between artillery fire behind them and sniper fire from shifting positions. Their assault faltered as confusion replaced confidence. Through her scope, Maya spotted him, Zarif, moving between rock formations, directing his fighters via radio. He was exposed for just seconds at a time, always maintaining hard cover, professionally cautious despite the chaos. But Maya had been waiting 3 years for this moment. She'd studied his patterns, anticipated his movements, prepared for every variable. Zarif paused behind a boulder, speaking urgently into his radio. Maya calculated the shot. 147 meters, uphill angle, minimal wind. She could take him now, end it, finish the mission. Her finger began applying pressure to the trigger. Then Zarif did something unexpected. He stepped fully into the open, arms spread wide, looking directly at her position despite the darkness and distance, challenging her, daring her to take the shot. It was a trap, had to be. Maybe he had a sniper of his own lined up on her position, waiting for her muzzle flash. Maybe he was wearing body armor. Maybe this was psychological warfare, trying to make her emotional and reckless. But Maya saw something else in his posture, desperation. The artillery had devastated his camp. His assault force was pinned down. His carefully laid trap had failed. This was a man who'd lost control of the situation and was making a gamble. She centered the crosshairs on his chest and exhaled slowly. "Don't," a voice said behind her. Maya spun, rifle coming around, finger on trigger, and froze. Standing 10 feet away, having approached in complete silence, was someone impossible. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, her spotter, her friend, the man whose dog tag she carried, the man who'd been executed 3 years ago in Helmand Province. Alive. Mike, Maya's voice cracked with disbelief. He raised his hand slowly. "Easy, Maya, I know this is a shock, but you need to listen to me very carefully. Everything you think you know about what happened in Helmand, it's wrong. Zarif didn't betray us. We were betrayed, yes, but not by him." Maya's world tilted. "That's impossible, I saw." "You saw what you were meant to see. We all did." Mike's expression was pained. "Zarif is CIA, Maya. He has been for 6 years. The ambush in Helmand was orchestrated by a mole in our chain of command who discovered Zarif's true identity. Everyone who died that day, they died protecting one of the most valuable intelligence assets we have in Afghanistan." The words hit Maya like physical blows. No, that can't be. "The photograph Zarif sent tonight, the bounty, its cover. He needs to maintain his credibility with the Taliban while trying to warn you that you're walking into a trap set by the real enemy. The same enemy who tried to kill both of you 3 years ago." Maya's hands shook. 3 years. 3 years of hatred, planning, hunting. 3 years of carrying Mike's dog tag and swearing revenge. All based on a lie. "Prove it," she demanded. Mike pulled out a satellite phone and handed it to her. On the screen was a video file. She pressed play. The video showed a classified briefing room. A general, someone Maya recognized from JSOC, speaking directly to camera. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, if you're watching this, then Michael Torres has made contact. Everything he's told you is true. Commander Zarif is one of our most important assets. The ambush in Helmand was orchestrated by a Taliban infiltrator in our intelligence network, someone we're still hunting. Zarif has been providing critical information that saved hundreds of American lives. Your current mission is compromised. Extract immediately and await new orders." Maya's rifle lowered. Her entire world, the foundation of her purpose for 3 years, crumbled. Below in the valley, Zarif still stood exposed, waiting, not as an enemy, as an ally who'd been trying to warn her. And somewhere in these mountains, the real enemy, the one who'd killed her team and betrayed them all, was still out there. Still hunting. Still winning. Maya looked at Mike, her voice barely a whisper. Who betrayed us?" Mike's expression turned grim. Someone you trust, someone on this base right now. And suddenly, Maya understood why Zarif had seemed so desperate, why he'd exposed himself so recklessly. He wasn't trying to capture her. He was trying to save her from the real trap. The one she'd already walked into. Part 7. The final confrontation extended 700 words. Maya's blood turned to ice. Kowalski, she spun around, but the sergeant was gone, vanished into the darkness as silently as Mike had appeared. He's not the mole, Mike said quickly, reading her panic. But we're exposed up here. We need to move, now. Maya's tactical mind raced, processing the implications. If Kowalski wasn't the traitor, then who? Someone with access to operational intelligence, someone who could coordinate with Taliban forces, someone who'd been undermining Fob's spearpoint for months. Then it clicked, Hartwick. Mike nodded grimly. Captain Morrison, actually, Hartwick's intelligence officer. He's been feeding Zarif's location to you while simultaneously telling the Taliban where you'd be. This whole setup tonight was designed to get you killed while maintaining plausible deniability. A tragic combat death, another casualty of war. And Zarif has been trying to warn us for weeks, but every communication channel is compromised. Morrison monitors everything. The only reason I'm alive is because Zarif pulled me out of that ambush before the kill squad arrived. We've been working together ever since, trying to identify the mole. The satellite phone in Maya's hand vibrated. A text message. Phantom, Morrison just called artillery on your position. 60 seconds. Move now. Maya grabbed Mike's arm. Run. They sprinted downslope as the first artillery round screamed overhead. The explosion erupted exactly where Maya's hide position had been, shredding rock and earth with lethal fragmentation. More rounds followed, walking across the ridgeline in a devastating barrage. Spearpoint artillery shouldn't be firing without Hartwick's authorization, Maya shouted over the explosions. Morrison's been forging authorization codes for months. He'll claim it was a defensive fire mission against Taliban positions. Mike pulled her behind a boulder as shrapnel whined overhead. And when they find your body, he'll be the one writing the after-action report. They made it to a depression in the terrain, temporarily shielded from the artillery. Maya's mind calculated options. Morrison would expect her to try reaching the base. He'd have ambushes positioned along every route. Going to ground would only delay the inevitable. We go after Morrison directly, Maya decided. He's the only one who can stop this. He's in the TOC, surrounded by security with access to all base weapons systems. How do you plan to? Maya was already moving, keying her radio to an encrypted frequency Morrison didn't monitor. Kowalski, if you can hear me, Morrison is the mole. Repeat, Morrison is compromised. He's calling fire missions on my position. Static, then. Copy, Phantom. I'm 300 meters from TOC. What's the play? Create a diversion. Something big enough to pull Morrison out of the command center. On it. 2 minutes later, explosions rocked the eastern perimeter. Kowalski had detonated stored demolition charges. Alarms blared across Fob's spearpoint as soldiers rushed to respond to the apparent enemy attack. Maya and Mike used the chaos to infiltrate the base through the damaged western gate. They moved like shadows, avoiding guard posts, using intimate knowledge of the base layout. The TOC stood ahead, its entrance guarded by 2 soldiers who had no idea their intelligence officer was a traitor. Maya couldn't kill them. They were just doing their jobs. Instead, she created a distraction, firing a round into the air. The guards turned and Mike disabled them with quick strikes, leaving them unconscious but alive. Inside the TOC, Morrison stood alone, monitoring multiple screens showing base defenses. He sensed their presence a second too late, spinning with his sidearm drawn. Don't, Maya said, her rifle centered on his chest. Morrison's face twisted with calculation. He was trapped, but his hand moved toward the radio, probably to call for help or trigger some final contingency. Maya shot the radio, destroying it. "It's over, Morrison. Zarif is CIA, Mike is alive, and I know everything." Morrison's laugh was bitter. "You know nothing. You think this is about money, about ideology." He glared at her with pure hatred. "My brother was a contractor in Kandahar. Zarif's intelligence led to a raid that killed him. Collateral damage, they called it, an acceptable loss. So you betrayed your entire unit for revenge." Maya's voice was cold. "I made them pay. Every Taliban attack I enabled, every American casualty, they died because of Zarif's so-called valuable intelligence." Morrison's eyes burned with fanatical conviction. "And you, Phantom, you were supposed to die in Helmand. When you survived, I've spent 3 years trying to finish the job. You killed my team, all those operators. Necessary casualties to eliminate a traitor working with our enemies. Zarif needed to die. You all needed to die." Morrison's hand moved toward something under his desk. Maya fired once. The bullet struck Morrison's shoulder, spinning him away from whatever device he'd been reaching for. He collapsed, clutching the wound, his face contorted with pain and rage. "That was for Mike," Maya said quietly. "For Tors, for Chen, for everyone you murdered." Kowalski burst through the door, weapon raised, then lowered it, seeing the situation contained. "Base is secure. Hartwick is inbound. He knows Morrison's been compromised." Within minutes, the TOC filled with security personnel. Medics treated Morrison's wound while MPs secured him in restraints. Hartwick arrived, his face ashen as he processed the betrayal of his most trusted intelligence officer. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the mountains. Maya stood alone on the perimeter, watching the sun rise over terrain that had nearly become her grave. Mike joined her. "It's over." "Is it?" Maya touched the dog tag inside her vest, Mike's tag that she'd carried for 3 years. "I spent so long hunting the wrong enemy. How many people died because I was chasing ghosts instead of the truth? Morrison would have continued killing with or without you. What matters is you stopped him." Mike paused. "What will you do now? The mission that drove you for 3 years just evaporated." Maya was quiet for a long moment, watching soldiers move across the base, living their lives, trusting their leaders. "I'll do what I should have done from the beginning, protect them. Not for revenge, not for personal vendetta, but because it's the right thing to do." In the valley below, Zarif's fighters were already withdrawing, their commander's CIA cover intact. The war would continue, but at least one piece of the puzzle had been resolved. Maya turned to Mike. "Come on, we have a debriefing with JSOC and about 1,000 questions to answer." As they walked toward the command post, Maya realized something had fundamentally changed inside her. The cold fury that had driven her for 3 years had finally burned out, replaced by something clearer. Purpose without rage, duty without obsession. For the first time since Helmand, she felt like herself again. The hunter had finally stopped hunting ghosts. And maybe, just maybe, she could finally start healing. 3 months later, Maya stood in a Pentagon briefing room, facing a panel of generals and intelligence officials. Morrison's betrayal had exposed a network of compromised personnel across 3 theaters of operation. The damage was catastrophic, but containable, thanks to her actions. "Staff Sergeant Reeves," the JSOC commander began, "your conduct during Operation Phantom Veil and the subsequent exposure of the Morrison network has earned you the Intelligence Star and a Silver Star for valor. More importantly, you've saved countless lives." Maya stood at attention, feeling the weight of Mike's dog tag against her chest. She still carried it, but now as a reminder of survival rather than revenge. "We're offering you reinstatement to the intelligence support activity with a promotion to Sergeant First Class. Full operational status, your choice of assignments." It was everything she'd once wanted. Return to the shadows, continue the hunt, become Phantom again. But Maya had learned something during those 3 years of obsession. Ghosts couldn't heal. They could only haunt. "With respect, sir, I decline." Surprised murmurs rippled through the room. The general's eyebrow raised. "You're refusing promotion and reinstatement." "I'm requesting a different assignment, sir. I want to train the next generation of operators. Specifically, women entering special operations programs. They need someone who understands what they'll face: the doubt, the dismissal, the constant need to prove themselves." The general leaned back, studying her. "You give up operational status for an instructor position." "Sir, I've spent 3 years being Phantom. I've learned that the most important battles aren't always fought with rifles at impossible distances. Sometimes they're fought by changing minds, breaking barriers, and proving what's possible." A slight smile crossed the general's face. "Request approved. You'll report to Fort Bragg next month to establish the first integrated special operations training cadre." Outside the Pentagon, Mike waited by a black SUV. "So, are you going back?" Maya shook her head, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. "No, I'm going forward." Across the Potomac River, the sun set over Arlington National Cemetery, where her fallen teammates rested. Maya had visited their graves that morning, finally able to say goodbye without the weight of unfinished vengeance. The ghosts were quiet now. Phantom had completed her final mission, not with a bullet, but by choosing to live instead of merely surviving. As the SUV pulled away, Maya looked toward the future. Somewhere, young women were preparing to enter a world that would doubt them, dismiss them, underestimate them. They'd need someone to show them the way. Someone who'd walked through fire and emerged stronger. Someone who proved that legends weren't born. They were forged through determination, skill, and the courage to keep fighting even when the whole world said you couldn't. The commander had dismissed her orders once. But the female sniper had revealed her true identity, not just as Phantom, but as something more important. A survivor, a warrior, a teacher. And her story was just beginning. The end.